Ready, willing, and able.
So good morning, everybody. My name's Elena Campbell. You all know who I am, President of the Rochester Regional Chamber. Thank you so much for joining us today. Once again, huge thank you to Brad Lambert, who, as you know, has been guiding us through these executive orders as they come out. We apologize for the little delay on this one. I was out of town and Brad was out of town. So this was the quickest we could get it put together. We are recording this, so if you hear of anyone who was unable to jump on at this time, or you want to go back and review anything in the future, at a future date, we are recording it, and these are all put on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't checked that out yet, you may want to check it out. Follow us on YouTube. If you follow us, you will get notified every time we upload something to our YouTube channel as well. So we're really excited to get our YouTube channel beefed up and really using it to help our members out. So check that out. I wanted to make, before we get into the executive orders, a couple of announcements about some upcoming events that we have going on. The first one, of course, is our annual golf outing. We are so excited that we are able to hold our golf outing. Normally, it's the beginning of June. We were able to reschedule it to August 17th, still at Great Oaks Country Club. If you haven't played this amazing private course, this is your opportunity to do that. Maggie, I think we have a few spots left.
Yes, I have, I believe, 3 spots left for golfers, and I do have spots left for sponsors. So we have a couple of spots left for sponsors. So I'll type my information into the chat so that you can get a hold of me.
Thank you. We're really excited about the golf outing. We've already exceeded the number of golfers that we had last year. So great opportunity to get out and do some networking in a safe environment. We will be following all of the current safety protocols and guidelines. So rest assured that a fun time will be had by all in a safe environment. We have to thank our presenting partner as well for the golf outing, and that's Most Sherry. So kudos to them for stepping up this year and sponsoring the golf outing. This is the Chamber's only fundraiser that we do. So it is something that's very important to the Chamber, and particularly to our bottom line this year, given everything that's going on in our world. We also have Coffee Talk. Maggie, do you want to talk a little bit about Coffee Talk?
So Coffee Talk in August will be held at the Rochester Community House, as we have in the past. The only difference is that it will be held outside in a tent. So we do have a limited number of spaces. We are only allowed right now 50 spaces in that tent. You will, registration has to be made. You will be checked in as we allow people inside, and there will be no walk-ins at this event for this time. And again, we'll be following all the protocols that have been mandated by the governor. We will, there'll only be 4 people at a table, so everything will be quite quick. So join us. You can register online at, Elena's got it up on your, on the screen. So we are excited to be able to see people.
Yeah, and special thanks to our presenting sponsor for that, First State Bank, and of course our gold sponsor is American House. And we will have pre-packaged food available, as well as cold coffee in a can. So can't have Coffee Talk without some kind of coffee. So we will are so excited to see everybody in person. And then the last thing that I want to mention quickly is our survey. Please, if you have not taken our survey yet, take a moment. It's only about 5 minutes to complete it, and share your thoughts with us. Our board of directors on August 18th will hold their board retreat, at which time they will be developing an 18-month strategic plan. We will not develop our traditional 5-year strategic plan, but we'll simply be looking at the next 18 months. We feel that the next 18 months are critical for so many of our businesses, and that's why we specifically want to develop a strategic plan for that time period. So we are really looking for your feedback on what your needs are and how the chamber needs to change in order to meet those needs over that next 18 months. So you have a great opportunity too to win lunch with one of our wonderful CEOs who has volunteered their time to have a one-on-one lunch with one of them. They're Tom DeLuzin, the CEO of Chief Financial Credit Union, Frank and Jason Rewald. You get both of them if you win that one, of course, with Rewald and Sons. Paul Glantz, chairman, founder of Imagine Entertainment, and Mike Randolph, who's the senior vice president at Par Pharmaceutical. You could also win lunch with the Honorable Judge Julie Nicholson. She's with the 52nd 3rd District Court, so you can ask her any questions that you might have about the legal system, get some advice from her, how to stay out of court maybe, stay out of her courtroom anyway. And then of course with one of our mayors, Mayor Brian Barnett with Rochester Hills, or Mayor Bixson with the city of Rochester. So great opportunity, and it's just 5 minutes or so to fill out the survey. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and give Brad a second to get himself set up. And while he's doing that, I just want to recognize, you'll notice around my head, our 11 partners that we have in the chamber. I would be remiss if I did not point them out and thank them. It is their significant support of the chamber that allows us to do so many things like this webinar today at no cost to you, our members. So we appreciate their support. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our expert and speaker. Again, back with us once again, Brad Lambert, who will walk us through Executive Orders 160 and 161. Thanks, Brad.
Oh, thank you, Elena, for that wonderful introduction, and great job as always getting us off and running here. As you see, for this particular presentation, I want to thank everybody for attending. I've decided, since it did have a kind of a back to the future feel for me, so I thought I'd go with a movie theme here, because we are definitely going back to the restrictions and rules that we were more familiar with in May and June than we were in July in this latest group of orders from the governor. And by all means, whether I'm discussing the topic or not, feel free to pose your questions whenever they arise, and I'm sure Elena will take them in whatever order she likes during the presentation. That's just fine. Now here we're going to get into the basics of the executive order. The first one, 2020-160. And the essential revisions are laid out here. A lot of it is familiar, but the essential revisions are essentially the gatherings. You're down to 10 people now in an indoor gathering and 100 people in a outdoor gathering, although that does not apply to Region 6 and 8. That's really the primary difference you're going to see in this order against the previous versions of this order that you saw. And according to the governor, this is the 8th version of this particular order. I believe it started right around number 42. And now we're up to 160, of course, with this particular type of order. You'll note that bars, again, this is pretty familiar with the bars and restaurants that are operating. If you're at 70% of alcohol sales, you are closed for indoor service. And I do believe that is done on a per location basis. So if you're a multi-location bar or restaurant, you have to pay attention to each separate location. I'm not going to get into indoor theaters, entertainment a lot. You know, they're closed. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, you can say they're closed. And she is not superseding other orders other than the previous versions of this order with this particular order. And that means, of course, the mask order. Now, one thing she did do, and it kind of slid in there, she did modify her original order 147 on masks to what is now order number 153. And from what I can tell, and just doing a comparative reading of it, The only change she made was to clarify the protocol for questioning patrons when they come in the facility. You can essentially tell you that you can take their word for it. If they are able to, elucidate some kind of reason why they cannot wear a mask that's valid, you don't have to probe. You don't have to get into the particulars. And again, which is true for both orders, this order does not have an expiration date. I assume she intends to make modifications, as she has been rather diligently doing over the past few months, but there is no expiration date, which is a kind of an oddity when it comes to emergency orders. Next, we go to the really key question here with this change, and what is a gathering? So I chose Highlander, not exactly the best movie out there, but I like it, because the premise of the Highlander, of course, is that you had a big gathering at the end with all the immortals fighting it out for the big prize. And certainly there can be only one takes on a real meaning here, because essentially we're running on one branch of our three branch government right now. Now in law, when we look at a term like the gathering, we use dictionary definitions. In other words, it's with some exceptions, but for the most part, we look at dictionary definitions so that the ordinary person can get an understanding of what the term means. So I went and looked it up. And essentially what I found was what's in bullet point number 3. You saw a lot of assembly and meetings, so I had to go look at what those meant. And an act or process of coming together, such as an assembly for a common purpose. So let's get practical, because they can set the rules out, but we're the ones that have to try to apply them. What I did note in her order is that there's nothing in her order that says that you cannot have 2 gatherings in the same place, whether it's indoors or outdoors. So for that reason, I suggest, and this is me, this is not legal. This is not legally binding or issued by any legal authority. I suggest indoors a 2 walls rule. If you have 2 gatherings indoors and you have 2 walls between those 2 gatherings, I believe that approach is pretty much a safe harbor for that particular proceeding. As long as you're not commingling back and forth and treating it as though it's one gathering. So, the primary example would be if you're in an office and you have one office on one side of the wall and the hall, and then you have a hall, and then you have another office on the other side of the hall. To my mind, those are 2 distinct gatherings. Again, as long as you're not commingling a lot and basically using it as one gathering and just sort of a loophole around this. Outdoors, I think if the extent of the gathering is 10 feet is probably too close. But if the outer limits of the gatherings are, I think somewhere between 10 and 20 feet, it becomes more viable as an argument that you have 2 distinct gatherings. Somewhere in that range, I can't give you an exact number. I think it's almost like you'll know it when you see it sort of a phenomenon. But again, you'd have to avoid, if you want to do this, you'd have to avoid having people commingling all the time, because then certainly the powers that be are going to look at that and say, okay, these are not 2 distinct gatherings. You people are just commingling, going back and forth and trying to, again, have a loophole around the order. If you want to try to make something like this work, you really have to be diligent about making sure that the gatherings are indeed distinct. And I would suggest that you could even link them up by Zoom. Again, if you have one gathering over here and one gathering over here, and they're linked by Zoom, there's 2 distinct gatherings there. Now, not a lot of guidance is giving the effect of having somebody who's from the same household. Matter of fact, they really haven't defined household, what it means. I would presume it means that somebody living in the same house, but that's not necessarily the case. I've seen a lot of folks that not treat it that way. My reading of the rule is this, that if you have a gathering of, if you have a particular gathering and there are 3 people from the same household, to my mind, you get to add 2. So you can have a 12-person gathering. That's how I read the rule. To my mind, that's the most common sense reading of the rule. Moving on here, this is Demolition Man. Again, not a terrific movie, but we're sort of moving toward the dystopia that was portrayed in that movie, which is interesting. All the tracking and all the rest of the procedures that are going on. These are the other procedures that and provisions that aren't all that specific to what many of us do, but are nonetheless of some interest to us. And again, there's still the order out there that she is actually, I say favors remote work, she's actually ordering remote work for everybody but orders for regions 6 and 8. And she actually amended Rule 160 with Rule 162 to say that in regions 6 and 8, it should work remotely, whereas in the other regions, it's must work remotely. Now we move on to the other order, which has sort of been the companion order. These, once we got into the 90s, I believe it was, she began breaking out what I call the OSHA style order, which gets into the workplace safeguards versus the order that we just went through, 160, which is more of what are the specific restrictions on various sectors of the economy. And this one definitely continues the genre. As I note, there's not a lot that's new here. The record keeping is continued. I've noted there, we actually are still supposed to be doing the daily screens of the employees who come in. And the one I noted that it was there before, but it wasn't all that notable, is if you have a particular, another foreign speaking, non-English speaking, I guess I'll say, employee sect, then you need to have your posters be in their language according to her orders. So for example, if you had, if you were half English speaking, half Spanish speaking, my suggestion to you would be to make sure you have Spanish language posters and notices as well as English. I've noted that the public spaces language has dropped, and we really haven't seen a lot of guidance on what that means. And what happened was, basically, for example, I'll use offices. If you didn't have a public space in an office, then you're free to not follow the guidelines in the non-public spaces. I believe now what's going on in the orders is she's more into the social distancing measures than just trying to define what is and is not a public space, which is quite an exercise, that's for sure. We're going to walk through the sectors a little bit here, particularly the ones of interest to people that are in attendance. The retail stores, as you will see, we have, and this is not a movie, obviously, this is a picture of Rochester. We have 11 distinct requirements. Again, that's pretty similar to the previous versions of the order. Matter of fact, it's the same number. I did not do a compared version of these orders, but they look pretty similar to me. And they're all the same orders and restrictions that I think we've all become increasingly familiar with as we've gone through this pandemic. You do need the signs and spacing lines. We're still down at 25% occupancy for retail stores. The postings are the same, and all the rest is, again, quite familiar to those of us who have been reading and dealing with the retail stores aspects of these particular orders. And moving on to the workplace safeguards for offices, again, pretty familiar. It's the same number of subparts and rules for offices. They look familiar and pretty similar to me. There's a little increase in the distance protocols, more to the 6 feet, but not a whole lot. It's more, I would call it more just sort of incidental, not really all that specific. The personal hygiene signs have to be posted. The wipe down twice daily, and of course you see the rest here for the offices. For restaurants and bars, it's amazing.
My favorite movie.
What's that?
That's my favorite movie.
There you go. All right, Cocktail. glad I got a hit there. That was a good movie. A whopping 20 distinct rules, as I mentioned. That again is as before. She's picked out the restaurants and bars, and of course now the restaurants and bars are subject to the rules that were set out in Order 160 as well. This is 161, and I think you see the rules and you understand what we've got to do here. One thing that's notable is she still has the she still allows the districts, the special districts. We'll get into that in a bit with respect to this particular sector. If you have your licensing for being able to sell locally outside the bar, or even have the district outside the bar where they can be seated, you can do that as well. For in-house services, we have the daily screening before work, which is a little bit distinct because this is not solely for the rest of us. It's for people coming in. But for in-house services, it's actually for people who are going out to do the home in-house services. You still have to screen them even though they're not going to be working there at the place of business, but at what really is the place of business for in-house services, most of them, out to the customer's place of business. And you have to make the the appointment record and the other things noted here when you're performing one of these services. I haven't covered gyms, and who else did I not cover? Oh, the barbers and cosmetology, but certainly I can take questions on that if anybody has them. And I do want to know, none of this is new here on this slide, but I do want to note the importance of noting and being aware of the ongoing compliance protocols, which are listed here. You do not have to develop a compliance policy, but it's strongly advised by the powers that be. And again, we get down to your basic duty here is to just not serve a non-compliant objector who comes into your place of work, business, whatever it may be. I've noted this before in earlier presentations and have it up here again in terms of the fact that you don't have to become a cop. You don't have to use physical force. Matter of fact, you're supposed to avoid it. And just dial 911 or any other measure you think is appropriate if a confrontation is ongoing. And here's just a real brief update on some of the other orders that have been coming out. No nursing home visits are extended to the end of August, which again is a very trying thing for a lot of people. Remote notaries and witnesses, this is actually one that goes into the good column since we are not able to have a lot of in-person visits. It's good that we can still do the remote notaries and witnesses. Those are extended to a specific expiration date, unlike these two orders we're discussing today. Or EO 159 basically applies to the fire code. And I guess it presages what might be going on here, and that is that some business spaces can be converted to educational without the fire code inspections being required, at least on a statewide level. Now, presumably, and I'm sure this will work its way out, the local authorities can use their own authority and say, well, we got to do something here, but they are not required to do it pursuant to the state guidelines. And the obvious intent here is to accommodate the new instruction spaces, which could be coming out. And of course, we've all heard about Executive Directive 8, which is she's trying to prioritize the enforcement of these rules. Not sure what practical effect that'll have, but it's out there, and certainly I would expect that your state agencies are going to be a lot more vigorous than in your local agencies. You're just going to have to kind of read and react as to how they are going about enforcing these particular rules. I noted that the DDA came out with an email today regarding some of that. And I believe, yeah, a little promotional note there as the ladies did at the beginning of our presentation. By all means, let's make sure we support the chamber with the golf outing. It should be terrific. I can tell you from personal experience, I think Great Oaks is doing a great job of implementing the protocols. And then, again, this is our firm, Lambert Law, my son and I, Dan and Brad. And these are the practice areas that we have and that we serve our customers and our clients with. And certainly happy to hear from you or do whatever we can for you whenever we can. And again, thanks to the Chamber, Elena and Maggie, for allowing me to have this opportunity to present the latest changes to you. And with that, that ends my presentation. Elena, I will stop my sharing, and hopefully we have a few questions here we can deal with.
Yes, we do have a couple of questions. So the first one, can you use the theaters for other events? What do you think about that?
I think you can. You know, I've been saying to people all along, it's kind of, what hat are you wearing? And if you are consistent with the protocols, and I think the interesting one would be, you know, what I talked about in slide 3, which is with the gatherings. How many gatherings can you have inside a theater? Would be where certainly I'm sure the powers that be, some of them would a less liberal approach to that than I would. But I think you could have multiple gatherings inside the same theater as long as they're distinct. If they're all being blended through interaction and whatnot, just like I mentioned earlier, you're going to have a problem. But yes, it depends upon what hat you're wearing. And if you're in compliance, you're in compliance.
So how would that work though when you're limited to 10 people for an indoor gathering?
Well, that's what I was talking about. Can you actually effectuate like two 10-person gatherings. Yeah, you would have to pay attention to the gathering rules, no question. And I think that's where it's going to get interesting. Again, she's stuck with the language she's using. She said gathering. And if you have more than one gathering in that theater and you have it properly spaced to where it is a distinct gathering, you may be buying yourself an argument, but you could literally do that.
Okay. Another question. Who polices these directives?
According to her, just about everybody. Certainly, what we've seen out there as a practical effect is the Lansing, what I'll call the Lansing or state-based authorities, are a lot more vigorous and enthusiastic about these sort of things than many of the local authorities. They got their hands full already with their normal job and the fact that they can't operate as usual. So we've seen even in some of the presentations the chamber have done, we've seen some trying to not be confrontational from the authorities themselves, the local authorities, when trying to address these and enforce these rules. But the short answer is everyone, any authority, certainly the police, the state police. And in her executive directive 8 that she just put out this week, she did specifically mention the state police. She's trying to ramp up the state police a little more to be a little more active in this. And then certainly for restaurants, bars, and others who sell alcohol, the Liquor Control Commission has been a very ominous, shall we say, participant in this, because obviously if you're a restaurant or bar, you want to hold on to that license and you don't want to get on the wrong side of the tracks with those particular authorities.
Okay. Yes, and I know for those of you who maybe didn't see it, I know we did get a email from the DDA director, Christy Trevero, this morning, imploring, the businesses to please, follow the rules. They had a couple of reports that were investigated by the local police, and they did actually find that everyone was in compliance. The businesses were in compliance. There was a complaint against the farmers market that people didn't have masks on. They are not required to have masks on outside if they can maintain 6 feet of distance. The police did, again, investigate and found that the farmers market was in compliance. And they've been doing such an amazing job, the DDA, as well as so many of our businesses. So the perception is reality, unfortunately. Right, Brad?
Yes.
One person sees something they think is wrong, and they want to call. So just remember that perception is their reality. And so you don't want to be perceived as not following the rules either.
And I think we've all seen it. It's certainly been my experience. Even when I was on Mackinac Island, I would see people in the inner regions of the island wearing masks, which is completely unnecessary and frankly quite a cheat to yourself when you can breathe such fresh air. But that's the difference. You have people that go to that extreme versus other people who would rather not wear a mask even indoors. So it's all over the map. It's from what I've seen.
Yeah. And somebody was asking, and I was just...
I asked that question regarding,
go ahead.
I was going to say who polices, because I went to a restaurant because I wanted to have a few people make a reservation, under 10 people, but they said they want to make sure that everybody's wearing a mask, which I totally understand. But because they got busted by somebody calling in, they're being very, very strict on not putting tables together, everything. But I don't even know who they would have called at this restaurant, because not many people know the number to the Liquor Control Commission. I mean, unless they called the police, I don't know. But it seems like a total waste. I mean, I get it, maybe complaining to the owner and everything, but I don't even know who you would call to complain. I mean, I'm not going to call 911 unless somebody's carrying a gun or something, but I have no idea.
Yeah, well, and that's essentially was my answer, that everyone can do it. And certainly, you know, we've essentially, and it's very unusual and probably will be legally challenged or is being legally challenged at the time. We've all been deputized to enforce these rules, which really isn't the way it's supposed to work. So it is kind of a unique experience for all of us to be deputized in our own places of business to actually enforce these rules. And to her credit, she did not do that initially, but with respect to masks. But when there was, you know, a lot of this, what you just alluded to, Erica, going on with people complaining, obviously the order fell on the side of the people who were complaining, and now we are all deputized to enforce, at least as to our own places of business, not as to other places. I can't walk into your business and make you enforce the rules. All I can do if I was so inclined, which I'm not, would be to call the police or the state police or whoever I felt might have some say.
And somebody had asked what region we're in, and we're in Region 1.
Yes.
The Detroit region, and that's Genesee County, Lapeer, Livingston, Macomb, Monroe, Oakland, St. Clair, Washtenaw, and Wayne counties. So just for everybody's information.
Yeah, and 6 and
I
8.
have one more question.
Sure.
Businesses that are part of the directive, if they use, like we were talking about the theaters, if they use their business for something else, obviously they still have to follow the directive, but if they're deemed closed, are they allowed to use their business for something else?
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
the orders are use specific. So yeah, they can't allow 300 people to come in and watch a movie. Certainly that is not allowed, and of course the challenge, not only the 10-person challenge, but the challenge would be to make sure that whatever you're using it for is consistent with zoning and your license and everything else. I mean,
Right.
all those rules still remain in place. But if you can walk through that thicket and get there, you can try to do something. But I think the biggest challenge is the 10-person rule right now. And like I say, I don't think most authorities are going to be as liberal as me with respect to what is a gathering, but I think you're stuck with your language. Again, I'll go back to what I said earlier about gatherings. If you have a distinct gathering and there's people 200 feet over here and there's people 200 feet away over here, they could very well be distinct gatherings.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any other questions in the chat box. Does anybody else want to unmute and ask a question? And
Yeah, I have one more question. I know, I always have a question.
That's great.
You said there's no end to these directives. I mean, I know that she's been doing this every single week. So is there anything that we're going to see before the end of the year?
Well,
Like changes or?
Here's where it all stands in terms of the legal actions that are going on. I think the most prominent legal action, I couldn't even begin to tell you how many cases are out there. There's a ton of them, but to me, the most interesting one right now is the legislature's case against the governor, which has basically been put on hold by the powers that be in the judiciary. I suspect they just don't want to get, into the executive's area. And so what happened essentially was one single justice pretty much turned the tide and had the case that the legislature filed stayed down at the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals is slow walking it. So when everybody knows that this case belongs with the Supreme Court. So really what we're looking for there is what the Supreme Court is going to do once it gets through the Court of Appeals. And that could happen in September and October. But that's the one thing to keep an eye on. But until then, and again, this is my own read. I mean, I don't think an emergency lasts for 180 days. Okay, at some point, the emergency just becomes the normal. And the whole reliance here is upon the term emergency. I mean, she's using her emergency powers. So I think that'll come more and more into play the longer this goes on. as you know, the two statutes that she's relying upon talk about 28 days. So, you know, and the one allowed her to keep extending it. The other one, the 45, allowed her to keep extending it and not really dealing with the 28 days. And I should correct that. That didn't really have the 28 days. The 76 statute does. So that, you know, it just goes on and on, you know, figuratively, you know, forever, I guess, if you say that you're consistently in an emergency under the 45 Act, which is why there's a movement out there to repeal the 45 Act. And, you know, certainly that is part of the legislature's case as well. So what we're keeping an eye on is how the legislature's case is going through the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court to see how that gets reversed. And really everything falls on Justice Clement. She is the swing vote right now. That could change, but right now she's the swing vote.
Thanks, Erica. You're always great at asking those questions that no one else is willing to ask. So, well, and I know I speak for many businesses. You know, the huge concern is as we move into the fall months and the winter months, with those capacity limits right now for our restaurants and different venues, they can use that outdoor space. With the weather being nice. It's going to, of course, get a lot more difficult as the weather turns. And sure, some businesses can afford to purchase those igloos and some of those fun things that they can put outside and have heated. Others are not going to be able to. Also, you know, we're watching very closely because PPP money and EIDL money, you know, a lot of businesses have been propped up by those grants and loans right now. And as that money starts to get depleted, if they're not allowed to have larger capacities or even reopen, we have so many businesses that are still mandated closed, that things are really going to get tough for a lot of businesses the further we go into this year. So, and again, that's one reason why, you know, the chamber specifically, we're looking at the next 18 months for our strategic plan, because we realize our support to you guys is going to need to be different over the next 18 months than what we may have expected at the beginning of 2020. So if there aren't any more questions, Erica.
Okay, so the doctor from the Health and Human Services, how much from a legal standpoint, the governor is getting information from her, but how much from a legal standpoint does she have any power? Like doing some of these, she was talking about how the testing had to be, in order to get down to everything being open, the testing had to be like 10% of the entire population or something of positive cases, which, you know, there's 9.9 million people in the state of Michigan. So who do you count? Do you count little kids? Do you count seniors? Do you count? So, I mean, I know how much power does that division of the government have? Or is the governor just taking her information from the Health and Human Services?
More of the latter. That, you know, she is basically relying upon what that particular, I don't even know the lady's name.
I don't either.
What that particular director is telling her, because she has her own administrative agencies that she leans on. She can't do, you know, she can't handle every single aspect of the economy and the state's, like you say, 9.9, virtually 10 million residents. So she leans on, but certainly the director of Health and Human Services has no power with respect to executive orders. Only the governor does. And so she's more in an advisory capacity in that respect. Now, whatever statutory powers that particular agency's been given can be exercised in the cause of addressing COVID-19. And I know that that's actually been done by HHS. But it's not, but she let me put it this way, she obtains no new powers from the executive order protocol.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done.
Okay, well, Maggie, do you have any other announcements? Anything that I forgot?
I don't think so, boss. I think you covered it all.
All right. Well, with that, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And thank you once again, Brad, for your willingness to help us try and decipher these orders. It has been extremely challenging, we know, and we really appreciate your time and efforts. And I know that many have connected with you outside of this for your expertise as well. So thank you so much for all the assistance you're providing for our members. We really do appreciate it.
Well, that's much appreciated, and the chance to chat with those folks and help them out the best we can has been quite quite a rewarding experience. Thank you.
This was
Thank
the
you.
best PowerPoint, Brad.
What's that?
This was the best PowerPoint.
Thank you.
The movie references, yeah. Brad always picks some great visuals for us.
Well, thank you. I
I
appreciate
want
it.
to see Godfather next.
I should have worked that in. That I missed that one.
Reminded me of a question. Are you related to Christopher Lambert?
Maybe going back 12 generations. I don't know, but not that I know of.
I'll give you that.
Well, we do appreciate the levity because we all sure can use it right now, right?
Absolutely.
So thanks everybody for joining us. We really appreciate it. Stay tuned if more executive orders come out.
Yep.
We'll call Brad.
Very good. Right.
So, also one last thing. On our call yesterday, unfortunately, our member update call that was supposed to be with Dr. Shaner, the superintendent.
Now you're gone.
She
Now
just-
she's froze.
Yep, she froze.
Frozen.
Well, so Dr. Shaner was unable to make it yesterday as his mother is very ill and in the hospital. But they did release a press release from the Rochester Community Schools, and that is up on